escaping the realm of darkness. The paranormal guys are on a quest to find the answers to the hard questions of where the normal meets the paranormal and the weird, and where the natural meets the unnatural. So grab your holy water, call your mama, and get ready for the Paranormal Guys podcast.
Now, into the shadows with Shell.
Attention, all lost souls. It's time to get into the shadows with Shell.
28 days, 28 nights. By yours truly, Shell Ward. Thunder clapped, the rain danced hard, the dark sky flashed bright hues. But no one heard the shots ring out that night at 112 Ocean Avenue. All face down and lying in their beds, no one could believe how the walls had turned red. The demonic voices in his head led him astray. 6 lives were taken that dark November day. Time had passed and the house wouldn't wait, because it knew a young family had chosen their fate. A man of the cloth and friends would never stay. Something they saw or felt had them running away. The constant heat from the fire that roared, chopping wood became a daily chore. Day after day, night after night, they couldn't believe they were filled with such a fright. Red eyes glaring in trees, rooms that flies infested. No wonder this terrorized family never rested. Walls began seeping with thick, oozing blood. The dog began scratching, then the ooze became a flood. 28 dreadful days and 28 nerve-wracking nights was as long as they stayed before fleeing in fright.
And now, back to the Paranormal Guys podcast.
Welcome back to part 2 in Amityville with the Paranormal Guys podcast. Let us return now to Amityville. Boo.
One of the things I want to get into now is the photos. Some of these photos that have come up. When you were out there with Channel 5 News, how long were you guys investigating for, Laura?
Well, as it was ironic because I think from the time that the Lutzes did that first press conference was at the end of January of 76. I met with George and Kathy in early February, like around February 9th, 10th. It was a Saturday. But we were investigating for a good 5 or 6 weeks before the March 6th seance. So, and as I said, once Steve Bauman did that first interview, we ran the piece on Channel 5, ran on February 25th. Wow. After that, the thing blew up and everybody wanted to get in touch with the Lutzes. And at some point, I'm not sure, but it was sometime in February that George and Kathy basically severed all contact with William Weber. Mm-hmm. And this is the seminal point where, Weber sees his hopes and dreams of instant ready cash
right
being dashed, and all those people like Kaplan who Weber had contacted and thought they were going to. I remember talking to Stephen Kaplan on the phone when I was at Channel 5, and he's so, I know that this is true. I can't wait to get in there and investigate. And William Weber had also contacted a coven of white witches that were going to come in along with Stephen Kaplan and others. And Channel 7 was going to film an exorcism.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
And so I remember William Weber saying to me, well, you can come, Channel 5 can attend that too. So this was going to end up being like the Roman Colosseum. It was going to.
So you guys were like battling. These news networks are battling. Who's going to get this exorcism?
Yes, but at this point, though, it was Weber who was acting as a spokesperson. Remember, nobody, for those few weeks there, from the time of the press conference in late January until almost mid-February, nobody could find the DeFeos, the Lutzes. So everybody had to go through William Weber, who was in touch with them. Finally, I tracked them down. And again, you have to think of this in the context of the mid-1970s. There's no internet. Mm-hmm. There's no cell phones. Right. Okay, where did they go? Well, they had gone to live, George, Kathy, and packed up the 3 kids, and they went to live with Kathy's mother in this house. And Kathy's mother was a very, very devout Irish Catholic woman. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm Irish and Italian myself. And when I went into her little ranch bungalow, Mrs. Connor's ranch bungalow, you had to see it. She had a full-size crucifix on the wall. Mm-hmm. She had life-size statues of the saints.
Really?
I mean, yes, in our house, we had the crucifix, but it was like a regular size crucifix. Sure. So, you had a little holy water fountain. This was full on. And the Lutzes played me an audio tape recorder that they had recording that they had done with William Weber. Okay. And as they started to play it, before they played it for me, they said, we're kind of embarrassed about this. And that was the famous recording where they were discussing over bottles of wine, a couple of bottles of wine, about how they could monetize the house. And William Weber missed his calling. He was a fine attorney, but he would have been in Mad Men marketing, or advertising, because he said, "Oh yes, we could get this many books, this many movies out of it, and we can put the house in a trust amongst the 4 of us: him, Kathy, and George, and his law partner, Bernie Burton." And I remember distinctly George saying to him, "Okay, but I don't want, the kids can't be any part of this. We don't want the kids in front of the cameras or anything like that." And I distinctly recall William Weber replying, "Oh no, the kids, God bless them. No, we'll keep them out of it."
Right.
And so there was that time, but this thing just blew up from the very beginning. It blew up. And I remember George and Kathy saying, "We're embarrassed that we got involved with him, but we don't have anything to do with him now, and we hope you'll still talk to us." But at the time, the other thing that struck me, besides the fact that they appeared pretty credible, and we investigated, we did background checks on them. Mm-hmm. I mean, Kathy had been a waitress. She had married her high school sweetheart. They had gotten divorced. George had been a Marine. He was honorably discharged. He was running the family business, and there was talk at the time that, the business was failing, but that didn't make any sense to me given the building boom going on at the time on Long Island. He gave every appearance of having, being comfortable. I'm not saying a millionaire, but he had a boat. He had a motorcycle. He and Kathy were both selling their homes when they bought, the Ocean Avenue house. And he had plans to move the William Parry Surveying Company offices into the basement, the finished basement of the home, to save money. Another suggestion at the time was that they made the story up because they got into debt with the mortgage.
Right.
But that didn't make any sense either, because they had just closed on the house in December and they weren't in there long enough.
That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense at all.
So, I mean, Paul, I'd like to hear Paul has some interesting things about some of the the wild theories that people put to him on this.
He gets some absolute whoppers, you know. It's like they abandoned the house because they couldn't afford it, and then the next thing you know, it's like, well, they made a load of money from it, you know. Like, well, on the one hand, they couldn't afford it. On the other hand, they were, you know, trying to cash in on. It never adds up. It's always something contradicting something else. It is absolutely crazy. But I do feel a lot of what it is that people do exactly like Laura was saying earlier. People over the years, probably people my age and younger, they do pick up very superficial information and they just take it as gospel. And that's the story then. Excuse me, you need to look a bit deeper than that, you know, because people still come along and say it was a hoax because they just made it up with their lawyer over 6 bottles of wine or 10 bottles of wine or 4 bottles of wine. Bottles of wine change every single time, and they always get it wrong anyway because they say their lawyer, because he wasn't their lawyer.
Really?
You know, you get some crazy things, and you know, you think if you don't believe, fine, you know, but if you don't want to learn anything, then please go away.
Yeah, everybody's got to give their opinion on something.
Well, the other thing is that it's a moving target as far as even the psychic investigators go. And let me tell you, that was wild in and of itself, because I remember the Warrens being on Midday Live, one of the daytime talk shows that we had on Channel 5 with Bill Boggs. And they had a couple of other people like Stephen Kaplan and what have you on there. And they almost came to blows because all the paranormal investigators / psychics were fighting amongst themselves. I had originally, the first person I called to go in there was Hans Holzer.
Right.
And I had worked with Hans before and I had interviewed him before. And he hadn't really heard about the case at that point. Remember, this is prior to the stories being aired on Channel 5. We were trying to get somebody to go in. And Hans said, well, hey, we need to do this right. We need a budget. We need we need to do it as a 1-hour documentary. He had already done a documentary about a haunted discotheque in Greenwich Village 5 years prior to this. And I said, Hans, you don't understand. We're not the entertainment division of Channel 5, of Metro Media. This is the news division. We have no money. We're an independent TV station. We're not one of the networks. Can you come in and go with us tomorrow? He goes, no, not without any money. And so that was that. And then the second people on the list, and I had asked, so I was sitting there brainstorming with Steve Bauman and Marvin Scott because the Channel 5 newsroom was one big open news. And at that point, Marvin said, well, we should try and get Ed and Lorraine Warren. And I had worked with them before too. And Marvin Scott had done a couple of stories with them on a haunted church. And at that point, Ed and Lorraine had a good reputation in the local New York metropolitan tri-state area, but were not known nationally. And I called them up. Lorraine answered the phone. I said, hi, Lorraine, have you heard about this before? Ed got on the extension phone. And I gave them the background on the case and said, could you come out tomorrow with us to go to the house? And Lorraine Warren said, yes, we could do that. And she and Ed agreed to come out. And Lorraine said to me, Laura, just one thing, could Channel 5 pay for our gas and toll money?
Okay. Which is really not a hard thing.
No, but that's what I'm saying. They did the Warrens, for all of the flack that they get and people who claim that they're charlatans. The Warrens came into this. They were not looking for money. They were not looking to score. They came from a position of, we want to be of help.
All right. So let me ask you this then, Laura. Now, they only went in there that one time, and Channel 5 was only affiliated with them one time, and that was the time that you went in there. Am I correct on that?
No, we went in twice. So the first time when they came out, that was February 25th. Steve Bauman was the reporter on the story. After they went in the first time, they said, well, what should we do now? And they said, well, we need to, do a full investigation and have a seance in the house. So that was the second time with Marvin Scott on March 6th, 2 weeks later. But Steve Bauman had also, in the interim, after that first interview, had done another couple of stories. One was with William Weber and out in front of the house. And another one was, talking about some of the background of the case, because Steve, and I didn't know this, which is interesting, Steve was Jewish, but I didn't know, as somebody who was a cradle Catholic and gone to all Catholic schools, that there was such a thing as a Council of Miracles, that the Vatican had, and the way they would investigate these things. And at the time, when it came to exorcism and things, the Vatican pretty much, as they said in the movie The Exorcist, pretty much kept demonic possession and stories about that in the closet. They didn't really talk about it. They did not encourage it. Now they actually have a PR office out in Chicago by you, actually.
Really? You got to give me the information, because I'll tell you off air.
Yes. And they do now make a point of sending priests over to Rome to be trained as exorcists.
Right.
So Channel 5 actually did, including the March 6th seance, about 4 stories of this on the air over the period of 3 weeks.
Okay. So then on that second time they came out, they didn't ask for money either, correct?
No.
All right, so that's the point that I want to make, is about their credibility. There are a lot of people who didn't like the Warrens and this and that, and I want to just point that out, that what you're saying is they never asked for a dime from anybody. They only asked for gas and maybe some lodging. That's about it.
Not even lodging.
Really, not even lodging.
It was gas. It was gas and tolls. They lived in Monroe, Connecticut. And they were about a good 70, 80 miles away from Amityville.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Paul wants to say something. Go ahead, Paul.
I mean, to just throw in, kind of my observation, but pure observation, where we heard that before. Is that, first of all, I've got huge respect for them. I always have. And I believe that they were good people. And I learned a long time ago that they never took any money other than covering expenses. The one thing that I do have to say, and I don't want this to sound disrespectful to them, is when they talked, they could come across too much. Do you see what I'm saying here?
No, actually, I do see what you're saying there. I've gone across videos of him, and he's a very strong man, Ed Warren. He's a very strong man, and to the point. It's almost like to the point where, like, don't argue with me, but this is my point, and I'm sticking to it. He was a guy who was very strong about his opinion and what he had to say. From things I've seen him on, I've never met the man, so I really, truly don't know. But from what I've seen, he's a very strong man. Miss Lorraine Warren, I'm going to tell you something. Reminds me of, like, my grandma or something like that. just a nice lady who wants to help. That's what I get from her.
Yeah, very similar, because I said they come across as very lovely people, like you say, like grandparents, lovely people. And I do believe that they had good intentions. I really, really do. But I think that where they got misunderstood, and this is where some people would have stamped on them, is that they could come across as just slightly eccentric, in a way that there's no room for kind of views on this. It's like we're telling you, and this is it.
Right.
Like when we listen to Laura, she gives us the information, but she's saying you take it and you believe what you like after that. But I'm giving you the information to do with as you will. Right. So I think that, like I say, although I do believe they were great people, I believe that's how, kind of they got misunderstood. Yeah, that's my findings anyway.
I think so too. I think you're exactly right on that.
Well, I will tell you that Ed was a very forceful personality. And one question I get asked a lot on the forums and things, and is it true that the Warrens got into a fight with the Lutzes? And that is true. So the first night that I introduced, we went out to Kathy's mother's house to introduce the Warrens to the Lutzes. Ed Warren, was playing detective. He needed to do his research. And just as I had done, and just as Steve Bauman, had done in talking to George Lutz, you ask them questions, namely, what happened? What did you experience there?
Right.
So I wouldn't say George was being coy, but he was dodging the questions. So we're sitting in, Kathy's mother's living room, and Ed was to my left on a chair, and then George was to my right. And, Kathy and Lorraine were sitting there, and Kathy and Lorraine were both gentle souls. Mm-hmm. Okay. Although Lorraine could be very feisty.
Oh, really?
Yes. If you tried to challenge Ed, or,
oh, that man,
get in the crosshairs, then you got tiger life. Okay. She was going after you. She would take on all comers.
Good.
So basically, though, Ed was getting, annoyed.
Sure.
Tell me what's going on. How do you expect us to help you? And he basically said, cut the crap, George. He didn't say it in those words. I'm paraphrasing, but, come clean. Tell us what happened. Otherwise, we can't help you. Right. And again, George had a hair trigger temper. And the next thing you know, the two of them stood up and they were going at it.
Yeah, I mean, those are two strong personalities.
Well, George and Ed had to be separated, because then Kathy and Lorraine jumped up to pull them apart. And then, so they sort of, and I have that in all of my notes. And then everybody went back to their respective corners.
Right. Now, on the day that you guys did do the investigation, and I was looking back at some videos that their son-in-law, I believe that's their son-in-law who did those videos back in the day for him. He talks about the day that he went in there and he went down in the cellar and he felt like this waterfall pressure on his shoulder. I'm speaking of Ed Warren, by the way, to our viewers, is that he felt this pressure and this electricity because what I'm getting is that nobody really had anything happen that day on the investigation. Am I correct on that, Laura?
You're talking about the first time we went in with Steve Bauman.
Correct.
We went around the house. No, there is one thing that was said in one of the subsequent books, where it said Ed went down to the cellar and he did have holy water and the crucifix, and was saying, in the name of Jesus Christ,
the blood of Jesus Christ, right?
Yes, exactly. And there's one account that came out years later that said Ed was confronted by a legion of demons.
Legion of demons.
I'm like, wait a second. I was 2 feet behind him. I didn't see anything. I didn't feel anything. So yes, Ed might have felt that pressure, but I did not feel, sense, or smell anything with my 5 senses, anything amiss.
Right. He recounted saying that he felt like pinpoint electricity during it when he was down in that cellar area. And that's why I'm asking, do you remember him saying anything? The only reason why I'm asking these questions is to understand. My understanding is that really nothing happened in the house when you guys went to go investigate. So I'm trying to understand, did you hear something? Do you remember something?
Yeah, well, so I didn't recall Ed, saying that he felt anything amiss. However, I will tell you that when we went into the house and Ed would lead Lorraine on, and we were going into the different bedrooms. We went into the room that had been Melissa's room, and before that, Allison's room. Kathy said she felt, Lorraine said she felt a sense of peace and solitude there.
Right.
And then as we went from bedroom to bedroom, when we got into the DeFeos, what had been the DeFeos and the Lutzes, the master bedroom, Lorraine knew right away. She said she could feel all the blood there.
Wow.
In the master bedroom. Now, one could say, okay, you could surmise this is the master bedroom. You knew people were shot there, so you could discount that. However, when we went to the third floor and got into, which was Ronnie DeFeo's bedroom, and she did not know it was Ronnie's bedroom. She did not know which bedrooms the kids slept in. I was right behind her there. And she started to walk into the room, and it was like she had walked into a wall, stopped and stepped back and said, I can't go in here. It's too oppressive.
Right.
She did not know, I can tell you for a fact, she did not know that was Ronnie DeFeo Jr.'s bedroom. But she says, no, it's just evil. I just feel oppressive here. And there's a shot of Lorraine on the second floor stair landing, which was that seemed to be a trigger spot for a lot of people. And Lorraine was sitting there, and you could see she started to get a headache and didn't feel well.
Right. She stated to the cameraman that if ever she had to come close to hell, that this was it.
Well, she said that after she left, actually. She basically said, that's as close to hell as I ever want to come.
Okay.
And it's funny because I went on several other investigations with them, including to the so-called Conjuring House.
You say so-called.
Well, they call it that. It's, it's the farmhouse. By the way, here's a picture of Lorraine. Okay.
Yeah, I believe we have that photo. Steve, do we have that photo? I know we have those photos right there. We'll get to that one in a minute, Steve.
Okay.
So on the staircase, but I remember she said to me after I talked to them, after we first went in there in February, late February, she said she and Ed were driving home and something followed them, and their car actually went off the road into a ditch.
Really?
It was something. It was not another car shining their lights. It was something supernatural. Is what she said.
Right.
Some sort of black type force, but she felt that what was in there was demonic, that it had come from the bowels of the earth. Is what she told me.
Now, the other lady, Mary, was she on the first investigation? The other psychic, Mary, what was her last name? Was it? Let me ask Paul. What was her name, Paul?
Mary Pasquarella Downey.
Yeah, Mary Pasquarella, the late Mary Pasquarella Downey. Well, just to give a little context here, there was nobody who was really producing or directing this in a tight-knit fashion.
Right.
For the March 6th thing. So anybody who thinks that this was staged or choreographed, it was not.
Right.
What happened was Channel 5, we were going there with our film crew. Our news director said, bring in a reporter from WNEW Metro Media Radio. Meanwhile, the Lutzes invited several other people, other psychics to come in. They didn't tell us this. There was somebody there from the National Star. Then the Warrens invited several of their friends who were also psychics or paranormal investigators, including Alberta Riley and her husband, Mary Pasquarella Downey, and researchers that they had working with them. Then there was this other group of people from a graduate student who was working with the folks from the Duke University, loosely affiliated with Duke University Dream Lab. So
Okay.
when I arrived, and you had a couple of other psychics, so nobody was communicating with anybody else. So when I arrived at the house that night for the March 6th seance, I recall just getting to the door, going to put the key in the door. The house was all lit up, and I looked in the side light, the door side light, and I nearly broke my neck jumping off the doorstep because I see this guy who looks like Count Dracula, literally.
Yeah, you were saying that guy, right?
It was Alex Tannhaus.
Yeah.
And Dr. Osis from the American Institute for the Psychical Research in New York City. And they had done a lot of work on astral projection and things like this. But this guy looked like, who was it? Saruman. Christopher, the actor, Christopher.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because he had the dark circles under the eyes and big dark eyes, piercing eyes. It was scary. But then you get into the house and I'm like, who are all these people?
Right.
So nobody had really communicated. Today, if Paul was doing an investigation, Neal, you were doing an investigation, you would have, okay, who's going to be here? This is the time. Here's what we're going to do. You would have
a protocol.
Exactly. There was no protocol here.
Right.
This was almost a party-like atmosphere.
Really? So this lady, Mary, she does an interview in 1996 with Art Bell, who, by the way, to me, that was the greatest radio guy for the paranormal supernatural. I had to put that out there. She states that, and because she never said anything to anybody, but she states it in 1996 on the Art Bell show, that she was feeling a little bit tired and she wanted to go lay down. So she went into one of the bedrooms and she lays down and there's a little boy that's in the hallway. So she starts doing the Our Father. When she looks back over there, she notices another group of people there. Maybe, supposedly, maybe the DeFeo family in supernatural form are saying the Our Father backwards. Now, Paul actually gave me this. And I set it to the side for a second, but then I came across it. We were joking about it. Paul, take us into that a little bit.
With Mary, the Art Bell one, because it's a lot of George talking predominantly, isn't it? Then
right.
Mary comes in. Yeah, I mean it's quite fascinating because it was the first time I've really heard her talk, and she was describing kind of very different things to what Ed and Lorraine Warren had been talking about. So it wasn't just concurring with what they'd said. It wasn't just, sort of reiteration. It wasn't just, saying, yeah, we all saw the same things. She did describe monks, so I believe.
Really?
Yeah, I believe so. And I do remember there is one documentary featuring Laura. It was the one made by Daniel Farrens. When was that? 2000.
He didn't make it. I mean, Rick Osuna you're talking about the History's Mysteries on the History Channel in 1999.
Aha, that's the one. Yeah, you do get a little interview with Mary in that one, and she described seeing a young girl spirit who she directed into the light. Said, "Go through there. You'll find everyone you love." She also described throwing some holy water that landed on a surface that sat and it sizzled as though it was like, if you drop cold water on a hot stove, it goes. Right. She described that. Yeah. But she also said that the holy water being there made a difference to the atmosphere around her. Right. And as we said, we do hear a lot about Ed and Lorraine Warren. Of course we do, because it's all fascinating information, but hear a lot about Mary, and these are very, very interesting things.
Well, Mary, the interesting thing about that, and I haven't listened, obviously, to every interview that everybody has done.
Oh, you can't.
But Mary, at the time, she was a very nice lady. She would be like your best friend or next door neighbor, okay? And she was very bubbly, but during the seance, she actually became ill ran out of the room, went out of the house, and she became ill. She vomited on the side lawn.
Oh, Lord.
She says it was making her ill. And then Alberta Riley, the other psychic who was there in the middle of the seance, she was sitting across from me, and she started screaming. She says, "It's upstairs on the second floor. It's moving." I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
But during the Mary could read auras, Mary Pascarella Downey. And I remember we went upstairs with her into what had been the sewing room, and she felt better as the night went on. But that night, I don't recall her ever saying that she had, seen things.
Right.
Or had seen a group of people or the family. I mean, that came later.
Yeah, almost like about 22 years later.
Yeah, and she was also friendly with George, and she was on a couple of those radio shows with him.
Sure.
And again, people were always trying to monetize it. I remember doing one radio show, and he was on there, and Mary was on there, and the next thing you know, the show host put together a sort of documentary thing of the radio show and was selling it. He never even asked for my permission, although I guess if you appear on the things, that constitutes permission.
Oh.
So, you look at that stuff, but a lot of this, as I said, has grown up.
Oh yeah, definitely. And
since the actual event.
Sure. And it's such a deep-seated subject that you would be here for weeks upon weeks, if not months upon months, keep talking about. But there's one last thing I want to talk about, if we may. Steve, this is the most famous photo of Amityville.
Oh, no, I know what's coming.
Yeah, everybody knows what's coming. Come on now.
So this one here?
Yeah, so this is, take it to the next photo. That's supposedly from the original one.
All right. That's
take it to the other photo.
This one here.
This one here. Okay. So supposedly this might have been one of the DeFeo children. What was his name? Christopher?
No. Well, the DeFeo children, it would have been Mark or John.
Mark, right. All right. So I have to call this one no. I don't think it's a ghost boy. I'm going to explain why. And I know that there's a lot of people on one side and there's another people on the other side. Me personally, if you notice, look at the young man on the right-hand side. You know this guy, Mr. Bartz, correct?
Paul Bartz, yes.
Paul Bartz. That's the shirt he was wearing that day, correct? Do you remember that?
Uh-huh.
All right. His hair, the way that his hair is, I want you to see that it's over to the right-hand side. Did he have glasses?
No, Paul Bartz did not have glasses.
So he did not have any glasses whatsoever. He never put on glasses. You never saw him with glasses. All right, well, that could take it away from what I'm going to say. But this one part, when you look through the stairs in between, it looks like a flannel shirt. And if you line it up with the lines there on his shirt right there.
Yes, they appear to match.
Now, could he have been wearing glasses? You're telling me no, he didn't have glasses. So that the only part that I have in that is that and his nose is almost exactly the same. Steve, take us to another picture of Mr. Bartz. You have him up there. Don't we have one other one? I believe we have one other picture, Steve.
No.
That's the only front one. I have to say that face there is very familiar to the face that's in the stairs over there. Laura, would you agree with me or disagree with me on that?
It looks, it's blurry. What you notice in the picture of the alleged little boy ghost photo is at first you think, those eyes are white out, like zombie something. Then if you look closer, it looks like there's glasses. Paul Bartz was not wearing glasses. I can tell you that other people who were involved in the Amityville horror documentary and others, thought that it was Paul Bartz. What I can tell you at the time was that the Warrens had their photographer there, Gene Campbell, who took many of the photos. But Channel 5, our cameraman, also took a few still photos as well. After I saw, because I got together with Ed and Lorraine subsequent to the March 6th investigation, I would go up, I would have lunch with them, I attended some of their lectures. When I saw these photos, I don't recall the little ghost boy photo.
Okay.
At the time, it only seemed to come out years later.
Okay.
And certainly, as you said, this is one of the most famous photos. That's not something I would likely forget. So all I will say about that is I was not there when and had no part in developing any of these pictures.
Mm.
So I cannot say one way or the other whether or not they are authentic or whether or not they have been doctored or what have you. I just don't know.
You just don't know.
But
okay, fair enough.
To my knowledge, Ed and Lorraine were basically honest people.
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you that they did not keep great notes and chronicle and detail all of their investigations. I can tell you that they were not good at marketing themselves.
Okay.
They made most of their money from doing not doing investigations, but doing lectures at colleges, libraries, and other places, talking about their cases, including Amityville.
Okay.
Okay, so, but I don't know. I mean, Amityville as a topic just blew up.
Yeah, no, it's totally crazy. So I'm going to go to Paul. I'm going to ask him his opinion on what he thinks of the photo, and then we got one more photo, and we'll call it a night. Paul,
the ghost boy. The ghost. Yeah. Okay, now I mean, for me, I don't claim to know what it is because obviously I wasn't there. But what I always say is I don't see a grown man. I personally don't see a grown man. I do see a child. Okay, yeah, that's how I perceive it. But I don't know whether any of you are aware of this. And again, this is something that's not verifiable for obvious reasons. There is quite a new film that's come out. It's called Amityville Resurgence, where there's a paranormal investigator who's using a spirit box outside. Now, according to this, it's neither John Matthew DeFeo or Paul Bartz. According to this, it's a demon. According to this one.
Okay.
That just appeared in that form. But also, according to this investigation that was carried out from outside, John Matthew, the youngest boy, was kind of stuck in the house ever since the murders until that time, according to this investigation. And allegedly they found that darker spirits were keeping him there and they helped him to cross over during that time. Now, of course, as I say, I can't prove this. I can't, sort of support it one way or another because there's people out there going to say, "Yeah, what a load of."
Oh yeah, we're never gonna really ever prove or disprove it. It's just opinionated.
Exactly. People are always going to disagree and think, "Oh, you know what? Someone's made that up." Of course they have, yeah. But that is a more recent thing. I hope I can say his name, Sean Austin, because I believe he's a great guy and a very good investigator. He does a lot of good work.
All right, last photo then.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
The last photo. Lorraine Warren was inside one of the rooms. I think it was a sewing room, where a photo. She was holding the hair of Padre Pio, supposed hair of Padre Pio, and praying to him. Next photo, Steve, where the elk. Now, me and Paul, we talked about this before. Now, this is what's weird. Okay, not the circle. But the thing to the left, and take a picture. Do you have the picture of Padre Pio? A regular picture of Padre Pio? This is Padre Pio, okay? Lorraine was praying to him inside the house and was holding a hand. Go back to the other pic, Steve, please. And if you look at this thing on the left, it's almost like the image of Padre Pio. It's just odd. It's odd. Now go back to that last picture. No, the other elk picture, the other one, Steve. This one here. This picture was circled, just so people know. I grew up in the 1970s. That's a G.I. Joe head. Okay, that's a G.I. Joe head. There's nothing supernatural there. One of the kids from the thing put that on there. They probably played with G.I. Joe.
Nice.
But nice.
But that isn't in the picture, one of the pictures that I have on that same picture of the moose head.
Really?
Oh, yeah?
So
Yeah.
you have go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see that on the. I'm looking for the picture now, and I didn't see the GI Joe head there, but maybe I missed it. I mean, okay. So I have the same picture. Oh yeah, you know what it is? It's next to these pictures in a way are grainy. Okay, so yes, I see the little head now. I wouldn't have noticed it if you hadn't pointed it out. So I have the same. Same one.
Yeah,
But
it's a Mandela effect.
Yeah, the Mandela effect. So the one thing that is, if you notice though, deep into the thing, it almost looks like Padre Pio.
Do you see that?
Here, pull up the face of Padre Pio again for Laura.
All right, here you go.
Okay, but Padre Pio is salt and pepper hair and has a gray beard. This has a dark beard, so I think that.
I mean, people. Maybe it was he was later in life. I don't know. That's not his last photo, I'm sure. But it would have been one of his. It would have been one of his last photos. Padre Pio died in the late 1960s, I think. Okay, I don't know. I'm not gonna lie to you. I don't know. But the thing is that it does show a resemblance to the facial structure of the man, which is odd because they were talking about that she, I know me and Paul were talking about this, and that she was saying prayers to Padre Pio. And then he brought this up, and I said to Paul, I said, that's a G.I. Joe head. And then he pointed out to me, look at this. I'm going to bring Paul in for 1 second. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I do recall that, yeah, because it was news to me. And actually, the first time this really sort of was highlighted to me was through my Amityville Horror with Laura and Daniel. I was like, good grief, yeah, there is something to this, because I didn't realise she was carrying that relic that contained a piece of his hair, so I believe. Yeah. But I will admit, though, and there's no point trying to lie about this. The first time I saw it, the G.I. Joe, I thought, that's Butch DeFeo. I'm sorry, I did.
Yeah.
Then hang on a minute. No, that's a child's toy.
Yeah, that's a G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
I know,
well, sometimes it's just a coincidence.
It could be pareidolia.
And that reminds us of that.
Right. Well, with all that said, I have to say, number one, Laura, thank you very, very much for being part of this show tonight. I truly do appreciate it. Is there anything going on with you right now that you would like to put out there that is going on with you that you'd like to plug?
Well, I continue. I guess because owing to the fact that I was one of the younger people I was the youngest when this happened, I'm one of the few who's left alive or not very elderly and infirm. So finally, after all these years, if I ever get it done, I'm like 80% done with my book on the subject. And it should be out within the next year, I hope. Because it's funny, I really appreciate your having me here. I feel like we've only scratched the surface.
Exactly.
You can really talk. There are so many other things about this that we didn't get a chance to touch on tonight, and what's happened in the intervening years, since.
Right.
I will tell you one thing, and this is not a plug, okay? All of us have psychic abilities or a sixth sense, but that's like saying everybody, people can play the guitar or piano or play basketball. That doesn't make you a star about it. But as you all know, if you're involved in this, and you hang out with psychics and psychic investigators, and you have people who have abilities, some of it at a certain point, I think, sort of rubs off on you. So back on May 6th, 2006, I'm sitting here in my home office and I'm writing a report on basically high technology stuff, having nothing to do with this. And all of a sudden, the thought comes into my head, I have to call Lorraine Warren. And it wasn't like, oh, I should give so-and-so a call. I haven't talked to them for a while. I mean, I was deep into writing this report. But no, the thought came into my head, I need to call Lorraine Warren. So I picked up the phone, which is right next to my hand, call Lorraine. She answered the phone. I hadn't talked to her in about a year. I said, Lorraine, hi, how are you doing? It's Laura and blah, blah, blah. Because Ed, at that point, he had had a stroke and he was bedridden and couldn't really speak. So we were chatting. I said, Lorraine, it's the oddest thing. You just came into my mind and I felt like I had to call you this minute. So Lorraine and I were on the phone for quite a long time, about 2.5 hours. And of course, we were talking about a number of things, Amityville being, very prominent. And I said, okay, so after we finished up our phone call, I said, Lorraine, let's get together for lunch. I'll come down and I'll drive down and meet you. So we'll set something up. I'll give you a call in the next few days. Well, later that night, I see these stories, my inbox, my emails filling up with messages. Hey, did you hear? And then I see it crossing the news that George Lutz had a fatal heart attack that day. And he was living in Las Vegas. And Lorraine and I are both based on the U.S. East Coast in New England. And we were on the phone at the exact time.
Get out of here.
George was having his heart attack. So the next day I called Lorraine up and I said, oh my God, Lorraine, have you heard the news? She says, yes, of course. And I said, Lorraine, you realize that we were on the phone. I called you at the exact time George was having this heart attack and dying.
No, that's another weird thing.
And she wasn't at all surprised. She says, no, that happens. But no, I've had many coincidences related to Amityville that I chalk up to coincidence. So, for example, Danny Lutz, after he left Arizona and came back to New York, he worked for many years as a UPS driver. And wouldn't you know, of all the gin joints in all the world, of all the towns in New York, he ended up having the route to deliver packages to my hometown. That I consider a coincidence.
Yeah.
Okay, but what happened with Lorraine and myself talking, I had a compulsion that day to call Lorraine. It was very compelling. I stopped what I was doing and got on the phone. We were on the phone for 2.5 hours. That was no coincidence. That was
meant to be.
Well, it was the universe saying, throwing something out there. And
I hear you.
And again, I'm not a person who stretches to try and make a point.
Right. I appreciate that story. That's a good story. That's an amazing story, actually, if you ask me.
Mm-hmm.
But,
yeah, and by the way, another coincidence I had, one of the researchers who worked for many years with Ed and Lorraine Warren, Brian McIntyre, I was walking to my local supermarket and somebody came up to me. This is just in the past, 5 years, and said, "You're Laura DiDio, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes." And he says, "You probably don't remember me. I'm, Brian McIntyre, although he's now Father Maximos McIntyre. He's an Eastern Orthodox or Russian Orthodox priest, but he was in civilian garb at the time. So it's a coincidence he would end up living just a couple of miles away from my house.
It's a small world.
No, it is. But what happened with nobody will ever convince me that what happened to me that day in court, feeling the compulsion to call Lorraine.
Yeah.
That wasn't a coincidence.
No, I hear you. Well, once again, Laura, I do appreciate you coming on. Let me go to Paul real quick. Paul, thank you for coming on. I know you were looking really forward to this, and I hope I was able to do a good job for you.
Fantastic. This is what we need. We've needed something like this for a long, long time, and I do believe that if we can get enough people to notice this is going to make a huge difference.
Oh yeah.
To kind of a lot of the arguments, because so many people, particularly in our group, they've got more respect for Laura than most other people, and this is what we needed. We need to hear a lot more from Laura because she speaks sense.
Yeah, and that's the important thing is having common sense talk.
Yeah, isn't it? Selling ghost stories is like, look, this is the situation. Make of it what you will.
Right.
And he's giving out some, definite facts that do need to be acknowledged before people are making their harsh judgments and opinions. Yeah. So you feel that this has been fantastic, and I do feel it's going to go down well. I feel it's going to be appreciated.
Yeah, I think this is definitely going to be a two-parter.
Yeah.
We blew through all of the other things. Yeah. One thing I would suggest is if you want to invite questions from the audience, or Paul, you want to put out a message on the forum, on the Facebook forum, and ask people what they'd like to know, that could be the basis for if you wanted to do
another one.
Yeah, another one.
You know what? Yeah. That's actually a very good idea. So we have a email system that Steve's going to put up where it's Neal at Graveside Paranormal. I would love to do that. I think we could take questions from his audience, and all four of us could come back on, and we'll take our time trying to answer as many as we can and do the best job that they possibly can. What do you think, Steve? Good idea?
Yeah, it's a great idea. And anybody here just randomly coming across this on our YouTube channel, I'm going to leave Neal and my email address in the description below. So leave your comments there too. Reach out to us. Let us know what you want to know. And I'd like us all to get together and address that. I was pretty quiet tonight because I'm not as up to. I have actually never even seen the Amityville horror movie. I've heard some stories. I was on a podcast in the past with Paul. And so all of the information that I have about Amityville has come from Paul, and it's also come from you, Laura. I'm sort of just fascinated with it, and I'm absorbing it. And I know that the next time I'm going to have a ton of questions.
Well, Paul has an interesting perspective, which I lack. Okay, because he being younger, although really, I'd like to say spiritually, I'm 25 still.
Aren't we all?
No, I'm not.
But no, Paul has had to sort of play referee amongst all the naysayers.
He does do a good job, let me tell you.
I know he does a great job, and he has the patience of Job. Because some of the things that I see that people say, it drives me crazy, because you can tell through no fault of their own. I mean, some people are not trying to be obnoxious. They are truly seeking answers and wondering. But so many of these things have become convoluted, and all of a sudden the threads have, come together like this, and there are multiple pieces of data or snippets, and suddenly they've been conflated or maybe altered or exaggerated, and they're unrecognizable. So that's why I make a distinction between what Laura DiDio personally believes, as opposed to what Laura DiDio, the reporter, actually saw and witnessed.
Right.
Okay. Some of these things with the new Amityville, the younger groups, the second and third generation Amityville aficionados, it's like, wow, that's a new one on me. I haven't heard that one before.
Right. There's always
So,
something
I mean,
new.
Paul and you folks have a unique perspective in that sense, because, and to a great degree, I attempted to stay out of the fray amongst all these people who were originally involved with Amityville, because everybody ended up suing one another.
Mhm.
And there was so much acrimony and competition. And I was not involved in that, and I'm glad I was not.
Good.
But from Paul's perspective, I would like to hear what, I would love for Paul to reach out to his constituency worldwide and say, what questions you have? What do you think is false? What do you think is true? And you're never going to get all of the answers, as we saw here tonight with the pictures. Right. Okay. But some of them can be debunked.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So with that being said, what we're going to do is we might actually try to do a live show. We can do a live show and maybe have a little callers call in, as well as, getting the emails and stuff like that. We should do something like that.
We got to get our time zones figured out, right?
No, just all you have to do is just send me a meeting invite via
like Outlook or
right.
whatever.
We'll take care of that. I promise you.
Yep.
Well, with all been said, my name is Neal, and that is Steve. And as always, boys and girls, I thank Laura and I thank Paul for coming out tonight.
Yep.
As always, boo.